Our guest is former Pennsylvania Governor Tom Ridge, who has just written a new book called The Test of Our Times. It's about being the nation's first Secretary of Homeland Security. It is a very good read, and you are being a real sport by sticking around with us, Governor. Thanks.
You're welcome.
One episode that you write about in the book is about you saying in August 2004 that the president's leadership was causing us to better target our defensive measures here and away from home. And the implication was that going to war in Iraq was a defensive measure like the Homeland Security stuff that we do here at home. You regret having said that, which the president asked you to say?
Well, I do agree with it. I do agree with the president's engagement of Pakistan in getting them and the intelligence service to get us the information that led us to make that decision. But again, referring to our earlier conversation, we had a conversation among the President's Homeland Security group. We decided that the hard drive and the surveillance tapes on northern New Jersey, New York City, and Washington merited us going up. So I'm going to hold a press conference. That's my job. I'm going to tell America what we're going to do. We're going to surgically apply the threat. We're going to raise the threat, which means more preparedness, more security. The last minute, at the request of some folks in the White House who don't need to be named, they said, well, why don't you praise the president? I said, well, I've never praised the president before, but I got a bunch of people waiting out there. I'm going to go, and I threw the sentence into the press conference. It became the sideshow. It marginalized the process. It had people then question, you talk about politics, when I used the president's name, and he deserved, I mean, it was because of the toughness toward Pakistan, that the intelligence service, blah, 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 but got that hard drive. I should not have mentioned it because it detracted from the real message, and that is the intelligence is real. The President's Homeland Security Council thinks we need to add security around these venues. So it marginalized my press statement, it marginalized the intelligence, and it became a sideshow, and nobody's more responsible for that than me.
But when you said targeting our defensive measures away from home, this is August 04, so we are more than a year into the war in Iraq, with the implication there was that you were talking about Iraq.
Well, the fact is that there was a war, we were talking about the general war against these terrorists and our presence in Afghanistan, Iraq, the pressure we had to put on the Pakistani intelligence service to cooperate more completely and comprehensively with us resulted in us getting that intel. We acted on that intel and went up. I should have never mentioned the president's name because it, again, created a perception. We talked about this earlier, that somehow politics were involved, but that politics was not involved in the decision. It was driven by intelligence.
Well, and that point I understand, but when I look at your record, I feel like, you didn't slip in a reference to the president and a reference to Iraq once in this mention in 2004. You were a crucial, authoritative part of making what turned out to be a false case to the American people about Iraq being a threat and us needing to attack them. February 2003, you said on ABC, I agree that, as the president has said, the world community has said this is a rogue regime that has chemical, biological weapons, trying to develop nuclear weapons, has means of delivery. That's the reason this individual needs to be disarmed. The point is, the point, in fact, is that the world community has known for 12 years he's got chemical, biological weapons, means of delivery, and that's precisely the reason of the United States and its partners are trying to disarm Saddam Hussein. He is a threat to his region. He's a threat to our allies. He is a threat to us. You made that case on national television a month before we started invading. Do you regret that?
No.
You think it's true?
At the time, I think it's true, and subsequent to that, the president's leadership and the things we've done have kept America safe.
Do you think that Saddam Hussein was a threat to us at the time that we invaded?
Based on not only the intelligence we had, but the intelligence we got from that was shared, I believe, it's been known by the Brits and by the French, that he had used weapons of mass destruction, that he was, again, several intelligence agencies thought he still had them, and I believed that if he had a weapon of mass destruction, a radiological, crude radiological device, a nuclear device or something, for him to, if he had them, did I believe that he would give them to Al-Qaeda? If he had them, the answer was yes. So the president going to Iraq, I said it and I believed it at the time.
You believed it at the time?
Yeah.
You don't still believe it, do you?
Well, it's pretty clear that the intelligence communities of several countries who had assessed who claimed that he had weapons of mass destruction, we haven't found them. So again,
you think that they might still be there and we just haven't found them?
I doubt it. I think we've covered that country, but there are other reasons to go in. That was the one that was that everybody focused on, and everyone who's been critical of the president for going into Iraq said we never found them. But I think the president made the decision based on the facts and the intelligence as he knew it at the time, and I think it was the right decision at the time.
You don't think that the administration, Vice President Cheney, your longtime friend President Bush, the intelligence system set up under Donald Rumsfeld, the Pentagon, you don't think they had any role in skewing the intelligence to a foregone conclusion? You think it was an intelligence community error and not a politicized decision? Really?
I know some of these men better than I know others, but I don't think any one of these men would have contrived in their own mind a scenario without, in their own mind and heart, substantive belief based on information they received that the threat was real. There's no way that anybody in that group, they would commit our blood and our treasure to a cause if they didn't think it was necessary to commit our blood and treasure to a cause to keep America safe. The intelligence may have proven to be false, but there is no doubt in my mind that they were motivated to keep America safe. In retrospect, we can say that the intelligence was faulty. Actually, we discovered a couple times that when we raised the threat level, a couple years later, there's one instance where we turned out to be faulty. But sometimes you don't have the luxury of waiting. And in this instance, if you thought they have weapons of mass effect, the United Nations had sanctioned them so many times and nothing ever happened, and somebody had to make a move. And I find it rather difficult to think that anybody in this country would believe that people in charge of their government, Republicans or Democrats, liberals or conservatives, would commit our blood and our treasure to a cause if they didn't truly believe in their heart and their mind that it wasn't to protect America. I just reject that notion.
I think that is an eloquent argument, and I have to tell you, I think you making that argument right now is why Republicans, after the Bush and Cheney administration, are not going to get back the country's trust on national security. To look back at that decision and say, we got it wrong, but it was in good faith, and not acknowledge the foregone conclusion that we were going to invade Iraq that pervaded every decision that was made about intelligence. Looking back at that decision-making process, it sounds like you're making the argument you would have made the same decision again. Americans need to believe that our government would not make that wrong a decision, that would not make such a take such a foregone conclusion to such an important issue that the intelligence that proved the opposite point was all discounted, that the intelligence was combed through for any bit that would support the foregone conclusion of the policymakers. The system was broken, and if you don't see that the system was broken and you think it was just that the intel was wrong, I think that you're one of the most trusted voices on national security for the Republican Party, and I think that's the elephant in the room. I don't think you guys get back your credibility on national security until you realize that was a wrong decision made by policymakers. It wasn't the spies' fault.
Well, I think you're suggesting that it was driven by, quite obviously, the people who made the decision knew more about the threat than you and I do. And again, I think it's a pretty radical conclusion to suggest that men and women trusted with the safety of this country would predicate a decision upon any other basis other than to keep America safe. Later on, it may have proven that some of the information was inaccurate, but there were plenty of reasons to go into Iraq at the time, the foremost with the weapons of mass destruction. That obviously proven to be faulty. But the fact of the matter is, at that time, given what they knew, and they knew more than you and I did, it seemed to be the right thing to do, and the decision was made in what they consider to be the best interests of our country. We've been litigating it now for about 5 or 6 years. I guess we're going to continue to litigate it. And historians, and the final history hasn't been written, because if some form of self-government, some form of democracy ultimately is achieved in Iraq, and it's not going to look exactly like ours, but you know, the Muslim world does admire freedom of speech. The Muslim world does admire democracy. As difficult as it is over there, the notion that we went in improperly will be obviously reversed, and the history is yet to be written. democracy in Iraq, democracy in Iraq will make a huge difference, not just for the men and women and the people and the families in Iraq, but for the entire region for a lot of reasons.
You can go back in time and sell the American people on the idea that 4,000 Americans ought to live their lives and we ought to lose those trillions of dollars for democracy in Iraq. You have a wilder imagination than I do. We were sold that war because of 9/11. We were sold that war because of the threat of weapons of mass destruction from this guy who didn't have them, and our government should have known it. And frankly, a lot of people believe that our government did know it and that it was a cynical decision. And maybe everybody wasn't in on it, and maybe that is a radical thing to conclude. But I think
I don't share that point of view. You do.
I know.
I'm not going to convince you, and you're not going to convince me, but I really appreciate the civil way we've had the discussion. Frankly, I think we would advance our interests as a country a lot further and a lot faster if we could have the discussions such as this. And
Governor Ridge, thank you for writing the book. Thank you for fighting my interpretation of the book with such aplomb. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much.
It's good to see you.
My pleasure.
The book is called The Test of Our Times, America Under Siege and How We Can Be Safe Again. It is out as of right now, and we'll be right back.